Naija Prime School. Sprint 1 Identity and User Management. Implementation Walkthrough in Visual Studio Code. Author, Benjamin Fadenestack, .NET 10, Blazor Web App, Auto Interactivity, entityframeworkcore 10, SQL Server, ASP.NET Core Identity, Radzen Blazor 10 Editor, Visual Studio Code with the C# Dev Kit repository, https://github.com/benjaminsqlserver/Naija Prime School. Contents. Contents 2. 1 Overview 5. 1.1 What Sprint 1 delivers 5. 1.2 Architecture. One overview. This document is the narrative I wrote while building Sprint 1 of the Naija Prime School management system end-to-end in Visual Studio Code. It walks through every meaningful decision X, how I scaffold the solution, how the 4 clean architecture layers fit together, how ASP.NET Core Identity is wired into Blazor, how the Radzen UI is assembled, and how the whole thing finally lands on GitHub. A developer following the chapters in order should be able to recreate the code base from an empty folder. 1.1 What Sprint 1 delivers. Cookie-based authentication backed by ASP.NET Core Identity, with GUID keys. H7 seated application roles, superadmin, head teacher, teacher, school bursar, school storekeeper, parent, student. Role-based authorization policies and a role scope sidebar. H lockout on repeated failed sign-ins, 5 attempts per 15 minutes. H revalidating authentication state X deactivated users are signed out within the revalidation window without needing to restart the app. Ha superadmin only user management workspace, list, search, filter, create, edit, activate/deactivate, reassign roles, and reset password. H auditing, create in/by, modified on/by, deleted on/by, applied automatically inside save changes. H soft delete with F-core global query filters so deleted rows are invisible to every ordinary query. H lookups, titles, genders, roles, as first class tables X no enums. Ha custom Nigerian themed green plus gold Radzen skin. 1.2 Architecture at a glance. The solution follows a classic clean architecture layering. Each layer references only the layers strictly inward of it, so the domain layer is pure POCOs with no knowledge of ASP.NET, F-core, or the UI. src/ sent u sent w Naija Prime School .domain / #entities, base types, interfaces. Sent u sent w Naija Prime School .application / #DTOs, service contracts, abstractions. Sent u sent w Naija Prime School .infrastructure / #Fcore, identity stores, service employees. Sent u sent w Naija Prime School .web / #Blazor server host, auth, pages. Sent w Naija Prime School .web.client / #Blazor WebAssembly client, auto mode. Dependency direction flows inward, web divided by infrastructure divided by application divided by domain. The web.client project is a peer of web. The web project references it so that Blazor Auto Interactivity can share components between server and WASM. 2 Prerequisites and VS Code setup. Before I opened VS Code for the first line of code, I made sure the tools below were on my machine. Everything listed is free. 2.1 Tooling. H.NET 10 SDK, 10.0.201 or newer, X the project targets NET 10.0. SQL Server X any of SQL Server local DB, developer/express/standard, or Azure SQL. I used local DB on my laptop and a local SQL Server instance on my development box. HGit for Windows brings the credential manager used when pushing to GitHub. HGitHub CLI, GH, optional, but handy for creating the remote and running pull request commands from the terminal. Visual Studio Code 2.2 VS Code extensions. In the extensions sidebar I installed these 5, in this order. 1. C# Dev Kit, Microsoft X brings the C# language server, a solution explorer, and test explorer. This is the one essential extension. 2. C#, ms.nettools.xharp, X installed automatically with C# Dev Kit. 3. .NET install tool X manages .NET runtimes the dev kit needs. 4. IntelliCode for C# Dev Kit X AI assisted completions. 5. Editor config for VS Code X honors the editor config, if one exists. I did not install any Blazor specific extension. VS Code recognizes .razor files through C# Dev Kit, and Radzen ships with its own IntelliSense via the NuGet package. 2.3 Verifying the tool chain. In a VS Code integrated terminal I confirmed everything. .NET version #10.0.201 or higher. .NET list SDKs #net 10.0 listed. Git version. GH version #optional. SQLCMDS /SQLExpressQ select at version #or, localb, /MSSQL local DB. 3. Scaffolding the solution. VS Code does not have the project wizards Visual Studio does, so every project was created from the integrated terminal using the .NET CLI. The advantage is that the commands are reproducible and scriptable. 3.1 Creating the root folder and solution file. Mkder Naija Prime School. CD Naija Prime School. Code. #open this folder in VS Code. .NET new SLN format slnx and Naija Prime School. I used the modern XML flavored .slnx format rather than the legacy .sln, both load in Visual Studio and in the C# Dev Kit Solution Explorer. 3.2 Creating the 4 projects. Each project lives under src/. I used the ClassLib template for pure libraries and the Blazor Web App template for the front door. Mkder src. CD src. .NET new ClassLib and Naija Prime School. Domain fnet 10.0. .NET new ClassLib and Naija Prime School. Application fnet 10.0. .NET new ClassLib and Naija Prime School. Infrastructure fnet 10.0. #Blazor Web App with auto interactivity produces both web and web.client. .NET new Blazor and Naija Prime School. Web / interactivity auto / auth individual / use local db false / fnet 10.0. CD. .NET SLN Naija Prime School. slnx add / src/Naija Prime School. Domain / src/Naija Prime School. Application / src/Naija Prime School. Infrastructure / src/Naija Prime School. Web / src/Naija Prime School. Web.client. The Blazor template generated both Naija Prime School. Web, the server host, and Naija Prime School. Web.client, the WebAssembly counterpart, side by side. I chose auth individual so the template scaffold the ready to customize identity UI, and I set use local db false because I prefer to wire the connection string explicitly. 3.3 Project references. The dependency graph is strictly inward. CD src. .NET add Naija Prime School. Application reference Naija Prime School. Domain. .NET add Naija Prime School. Infrastructure reference Naija Prime School. Application. .NET add Naija Prime School. Web reference Naija Prime School. Infrastructure. .NET add Naija Prime School. Web reference Naija Prime School. Web.client. CD. 3.4 New Get packages. These are the package references I added to each project. Versions follow the NET 10.0 release line. Domain. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Domain package Microsoft.extensions.identity.stores version 10.0.0.0. Infrastructure. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Infrastructure package Microsoft.entityframeworkcore version 10.0.0.0. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Infrastructure package Microsoft.entityframeworkcore. SQL Server version 10.0.0.0. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Infrastructure package Microsoft.entityframeworkcore. Tools version 10.0.0.0. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Infrastructure package Microsoft.aspnetcore. Identity.entityframeworkcore version 10.0.0.0. I also added NT framework reference include equals Microsoft.aspnetcore.app/ngt to the infrastructure project so that ASP.NET identity abstractions are available without pulling the full web SDK. Web. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Web package Radzen Blazor version 10.3.1. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Web package Microsoft.aspnetcore. Components. WebAssembly.server. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Web package Microsoft.aspnetcore. Diagnostics.entityframeworkcore. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Web package Microsoft.aspnetcore. Identity.entityframeworkcore. Web.client. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Web.client package Radzen Blazor version 10.3.1. .NET add src/Naija Prime School. Web.client package Microsoft.aspnetcore. Components. WebAssembly.authentication. 3.5 Restore and first build. .NET Restore. .NET Build. Everything compiled, leaving me with an empty but structurally correct clean architecture solution ready to grow. For the domain layer. Domain contains the company's language, entities, value types, and the interfaces that describe cross-cutting concerns like auditing and soft delete. It has a single package reference Microsoft.extensions.identity.stores which gives me access to identity user and LTT key and GT and identity role and LTT key and GT base classes without pulling in fcore. 4.1 Auditing and soft delete contracts. I define two tiny interfaces under common/ so any entity can opt in independently. / common / iauditable.cs. Public interface iauditable. Date time offset create and get, set. String. Created by get, set. Date time offset. Modified on get, set. String. Modified by get, set. / common / isoftdelete.cs. Public interface isoftdelete. Bool is deleted get, set. Date time offset. Deleted on get, set. String. Deleted by get, set. Then base entity gives ordinary entities a GUID key and implements both interfaces so I do not need to repeat the boilerplate on every table. Public abstract class base entity, iauditable, isoftdelete. Public GUID ID get, set, equals GUID.new GUID. Public datetime offset create and get, set, equals datetime offset.utc now. Public string. Created by get, set. Public datetime offset. Modified on get, set. Public string. Modified by get, set. Public bool is deleted get, set. Public datetime offset. Deleted on get, set. Public string. Deleted by get, set. 4.2 Identity entities. Application user extends identity user and LTGUID and GT and additionally implements iauditable and isoftdelete so the same audit columns flow through the user's table. I added the profile fields the UI asks for: first name, last name, middle name, title ID, gender ID, date of birth, address, profile photo URL, and is active flag, and a small pair of deactivation fields. I also exposed a computed full name property that the UI uses everywhere. Public class application user, identity user and LTGUID and GT, I-auditable, I-soft delete. Public string first name get, set, equals string.empty. Public string last name get, set, equals string.empty. Public string middle name get, set. Public GUID title ID get, set. Public title get, set. Public GUID gender ID get, set. Public gender get, set. Public date time date of birth get, set. Public string address get, set. Public string profile photo URL get, set. Public bool is active get, set, equals true. Public date time offset deactivated on get, set. Public string deactivation reason get, set. Slash asterisk I auditable plus I soft delete members, omitted for brevity asterisk slash. Public string full name equals and GT string dot is null or white space, middle name. Dollar first name last name dot trim. Dollar first name middle name last name dot trim. Application role and application user role are the same pattern. Extend the identity base types, add description slash audit fields, and, for the join table, track assigned in and assigned by so there is a breadcrumb for who added a user to a role and when. 4.3 Lookup tables. No enums. Anything that would normally be a C# enum I modeled as a database table. This makes the data translatable, extensible by data rather than by code, and visible in reports. For Sprint 1 those tables are title and gender. Public class gender, base entity. Public string name get, set, equals string.empty. Public string code get, set, equals string.empty. Public int display order get, set. Public iCollection and LT application user and GT users get, set, equals. Title follows the same shape minus the code column. 4.4 Role names constants, not an enum. Role membership is validated against strings everywhere in ASP.NET. The authorize attribute and policies expect string role names, but I did not want magic strings scattered through the code. So roles is a static class whose members are const strings. Public static class roles. Public const string superadmin equals nameof, superadmin. Public const string head teacher equals nameof, head teacher. Public const string teacher equals nameof, teacher. Public const string school bursar equals nameof, school bursar. Public const string school storekeeper equals nameof, school storekeeper. Public const string parent equals nameof, parent. Public const string student equals nameof, student. Public static read-only I read-only list and string and GT all equals. Superadmin, head teacher, teacher, school bursar. School storekeeper, parent, student. The seeder iterates roles.all to create exactly these rows on every startup, and the Razor pages spell role names as roles.superadmin so the compiler catches typos. 5. The application layer. Application holds contracts, service interfaces and DTOs with no FCore, no ASP.NET, and no Razor. Its sole dependency is domain. 5.1 Cross-cutting abstractions. Two helpers are used by almost every feature. Public interface iCurrent user. GUID. User ID get. String. Username get. Bool is authenticated get. iCurrent user is implemented in the web project, where HTTP context is available, but consumed by application DB context in infrastructure so that audit columns can be stamped with the signed-in user's name without leaking HTTP context into fcore. Public class operation result. Public bool succeeded get, init. Public I read-only list handled string and GT errors get, init, equals. Public static operation result success, equals and GT new, succeeded equals true. Public static operation result failure, perm string errors, equals and GT new, succeeded equals false, errors equals errors. Public class operation result and LTT and GT, operation result. Public T data get, init. Public static operation result and LTT and GT success, T data, equals and GT new, succeeded equals true, data equals data. Operation result let services return a predictable shape X success plus data or failure plus an array of messages X without throwing exceptions for expected validation failures. The Blazor pages turn those messages into Radzen notification pop-ups. 5.2 Data Transfer Objects. Each feature has small request/response DTOs in application/users/those/. Data annotations attributes live on the requests so that Blazor's data annotations validator can use them without redeclaring the rules on the page. User DTO X flat projection returned to the UI, including title name, gender name, full name, is active, and the role names. Create user request X username, email, password, confirm password, profile fields, is active, and roles, a list handled string and GT. Roles carries required and min length, 1, so the form cannot be submitted without a role. Update user request X profile plus contact fields, but no password and no roles. Role changes go through the dedicated assign roles page. User list filter X paging inputs, search term, role, is active, skip, take, order by. Plus a generic paged result and LTT and GT. Lookup DTO/role DTO X simple ID/name, plus code, description, shapes for drop-downs and tables. 5.3 Service contracts. Two interfaces own the entire sprint's behavior. Public interface I user service. Task and LT paged result and LT user DTO and GT list async, user list filter, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT user DTO, and GT get by ID async, GUID ID, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT operation result and LT GUID and GT create async, create user request, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT operation result and GT update async, update user request, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT operation result and GT set active async, GUID user ID, bool is active, string, reason, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT operation result and GT soft delete async, GUID user ID, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT operation result and GT assign roles async, GUID user ID, i.e. numerable handled string and GT roles, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT operation result and GT set password async, GUID user ID, string new password, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT I read only list handled string and GT get roles async, GUID user ID, cancellation token CT equals default. Public interface I lookup service. Task and LT I read only list and LT lookup DTO and GT get genders async, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LT I read only list and LT lookup DTO and GT get titles async, cancellation token CT equals default. Task and LTI read-only list and LT role DTO and GT get roles async, cancellation token CT equals default. Notice that every method takes a cancellation token with a default value. Blazor server components pass the component's cancellation token naturally, so long-running queries stop when the user navigates away. 6. The infrastructure layer. Infrastructure does the heavy lifting. It owns the F-core DB context, all persistence, and the real implementations of the service interfaces. It depends on application and therefore transitively on domain. 6.1 Application DB context. I started with Identity DB context because identity needs its own DB context with the user store and role store relationships pre-configured. I used the 8 generic argument overload so I could supply my own application user role join entity, which carries assign eden / assigned by. Public class application DB context. DB context options and LT application DB context and GT options. I current user current user. Identity DB context and LT. Application user. Application role. GUID. Identity user claim and LT GUID and GT. Application user role. Identity user login and LT GUID and GT. Identity role claim and LT GUID and GT. Identity user token and LT GUID and GT options. Public DB set and LT gender and GT genders equals and GT set and LT gender and GT. Public DB set and LT title and GT titles equals and GT set and LT title and GT. The constructor takes iCurrent user alongside the options so that the audit logic can reach the signed-in user without static state. I pass it into a primary constructor, a C# 12 feature, to keep the plumbing tight. 6.2 Model configuration. In on-model creating I do 3 things: rename the identity tables to friendlier names, apply column constraints, and attach soft delete query filters. A small extract. Builder.entity and LT application user and GT, B equals and GT. B.totable, users. B.property, U equals and GT U.first name, has max length, 80, is required. B.property, U equals and GT U.last name, has max length, 80, is required. B.ignore, U equals and GT U.full name. B.has one, U equals and GT U.title, with many, T equals and GT T.users. Has foreign key, U equals and GT U.title ID. OwnDelete, delete behavior. Set null. B. Has one, U equals and GT U.gender, with many, G equals and GTG. Users. Has foreign key, U equals and GT U.gender ID. OwnDelete, delete behavior. Set null. B. Has index, U equals and GT U. Is deleted. B. Has query filter, U equals and GT U. Is deleted. The has query filter call is the critical line. Every LINQ query against users automatically filters out soft deleted rows. Admin reports that need to see deleted rows can call ignore query filters explicitly. For the lookup tables I wrote a tiny configure lookup and LTT and GT helper that applies the same pattern, table name, audit column lengths, soft delete filter, so I do not repeat myself across gender and title. 6.3 Auditing and soft delete inside save changes. Rather than stamp created by, modified by, deleted by manually in every service, I override save changes / save changes async to do it in one place. Private void apply audit and soft delete. var now equals datetime offset.utc now. var username equals current user.username. System. For each, var entry in change tracker.entries. If, entry.entity is auditable a. If, entry.state equals entity state.added. A.create eden equals a.create eden equals default. Now, a.create Eden. A.created by equals username. Else if entry.state equals entity state.modified. A.modified on equals now. A.modified by equals username. If entry.entity is isoft delete s and entry.state equals entity state.deleted. Entry.state equals entity state.modified, / turn delete into update. S.is deleted equals true. S.deleted on equals now. S.deleted by equals username. Rewriting deleted modified is the trick that turns every db.remove call into a soft delete without services needing to know about it. 6.4 Dependency Injection x Add infrastructure. I expose a single extension method that the web project calls from program.cs. It registers the DB context, configures identity with the password and lockout rules, and wires up the service implementations. Public static iService collection add infrastructure. This iService collection services, configuration. var connection string equals configuration.get connection string, default connection. Throw new invalid operation exception, connection string default connection not found. Services.add DB context and LT application DB context and GT, options equals and GT. Options.use SQL Server, connection string, SQL equals and GT. SQL.migrations assembly, type of, application DB context, .assembly.full name. Services. .add identity core and LT application user and GT, O equals and GT. O.signin. Require confirmed account equals false. O.user. Require unique email equals true. O.password. Require digit equals true. O.password. Require lowercase equals true. O.password. Require uppercase equals true. O.password. Require non-alphanumeric equals true. O.password. Required length equals 8. O.lockout. Allowed for new users equals true. O.lockout. Max failed access attempts equals 5. O.lockout. Default lockout timespan equals timespan. From minutes, 15. Address roles and LT application role and GT. Add entity framework stores and LT application DB context and GT. Add sign-in manager. Add default token providers. Services. Add scoped and LTI user service and GT. Services. Add scoped and LTI lookup service and GT. Return services. 6.5 User service. User service uses the identity user manager / role manager for the operations they know about, create, password, role membership, and drops down to application DB context directly for list queries that need flexible filtering. Notable decisions. List async joins user roles - and GT roles manually rather than calling user manager.get roles async per user, because the latter would be n+1 queries for a paged list. Create async validates uniqueness of username and email upfront, checks every requested role actually exists, then creates the user and assigns roles in 2 calls. Set active async flips is active, sets lockout end to date time offset. Max value when deactivating, so the cookie is rejected immediately, and calls update security stamp async so the revalidating provider will log the user out within its 30-minute window. Soft delete async does the same plus sets is deleted equals true, the global query filter on users means the row vanishes from ordinary queries. Assign roles async diffs the current role set against the requested set and only adds / removes the difference, so the audit log stays clean. Set password async uses a generated reset token rather than passing identity's internal password hash APIs x more conservative. 6.6 Lookup service. Lookup service is a thin projection layer x genders ordered by display order, titles the same, and roles ordered by name. Each method returns lookup DTO / role DTO so the UI never sees the raw entities. 6.7 Database initializer x migrate and seed. A single static class drives first run bootstrapping. Called from program.cs after the D container is built. If 6. Applies any outstanding fcore migrations, db.database.migrate async. 7. Seeds genders, male, female, and 9 titles, Mr., Mrs., Miss, Ms., Dr., Professor, Chief, Al-Hajj, Al-Hajja, if those tables are empty. 8. Iterates roles.all and creates any missing application role rows with descriptions and is system role equals true. 9. Creates the default superadmin user, superadmin at naijaPrimeSchool.ng/admin at 12345, if none exists, and adds them to the superadmin role. This is what makes the app runnable on a fresh database without any manual SQL. The README warns administrators to reset that initial password on first sign-in. 6.8 Creating the first migration. I installed .NET globally, once per machine, and then added the initial migration. The migration lives in the infrastructure project but is driven by the web project because that is where the connection string lives. .NET Tool install global .NET F version 10.0.0. .NET F migrations add initial create / project src/Naija Prime School.infrastructure / startup project src/Naija Prime School.web / output dir persistence / migrations. Because database initializer.initialize async runs on every startup and calls migrate async, I did not need a separate .NET F database update step X, but it is still available if I want to apply migrations out of band. 7. The web host wiring Blazor plus identity. The web project is the composition root. It boots Blazor, registers Radzen, turns on authentication, builds the authorization policies, and finally runs the database initializer. 7.1 Program.cs walkthrough. Reading program.cs top to bottom tells you almost everything. var builder equals web application.create builder, args. builder.services.add razor components. .add interactive server components. .add interactive WebAssembly components. .add authentication state serialization. Builder.services.add cascading authentication state. Builder.services.add scoped and LT identity redirect manager and GT. Builder.services.add scoped and LT authentication state provider. Identity revalidating authentication state provider and GT. Builder.services.add HTTP context accessor. Builder.services.add scoped and LTI current user accessor and GT. Builder.services.add authentication, O equals and GT. O.default scheme equals identity constants. Application scheme. O.default sign-in scheme equals identity constants. External scheme. Add identity cookies. Builder.services.configure application cookie, O equals and GT. O.login path equals /account/login. O.access denied path equals /account/access denied. O.logout path equals /account/logout. O.sliding expiration equals true. O.expire timespan equals timespan. From hours, 8. Builder.services.add infrastructure, builder.configuration. Builder.services.add authorization, O equals and GT. O.add policy, managi users, P equals and GTP. Require role, roles.superadmin. Builder.services.add Radzen components. After app equals builder.build, the request pipeline is if app environment.is development. App use WebAssembly debugging. Else app use exception handler, /error, create scope for errors, true. App use HSTS. App use status code pages with re-execute, /not found, create scope for status code pages, true. App use HTTPS redirection. App use anti-forgery. App map static assets. App map razor components and LT app and GT. Add interactive server render mode. Add interactive WebAssembly render mode. Add additional assemblies, type of, Naija Prime School. Web.client _ imports, assembly. App map additional identity endpoints. Using, var scope equals app services. Create scope. Await database initializer. Initialize async, scope. Service provider. App run. The single authorization policy, manage users, is what guards every user management page with authorize, roles equals roles. Superadmin, I also kept the direct role form on the pages as a defensive belt and braces. 7.2 Current user accessor bridging HTTP context to div. Current user is implemented in the web project because only here is HTTP context available. Public sealed class current user accessor, HTTP context accessor CTX, current user. Public GUID. User ID. Get. var raw equals CTX.HTTP context. User.find first value, claim types. Name identifier. Return GUID.try parse, raw, out var ID. ID, null. Public string. Username equals and GTCTX.HTTP context. User.identity. Name. Public bool is authenticated equals and GTCTX.HTTP context. User.identity. Is authenticated equals true. 7.3 Logout endpoint. I mapped a post/account/logout endpoint so the header logout button is a traditional form submission, anti-forgery token included. It calls sign-in manager.signout async and redirects back to login. Account group.map post/logout async. From services sign-in manager and LT application user and GT sign-in manager. From form string. Return URL equals and GT. Await sign-in manager.signout async. Return typed results.local redirect $/return URL. Account/login. 7.4 Revalidating authentication state. A plain cookie would let a deactivated user keep clicking around until the cookie expired. I do not want that. Identity Revalidating Authentication State Provider extends the framework's revalidating server authentication state provider and rechecks the user against the database every 30 minutes if the user is deleted, deactivated, or their security stamp has changed. The provider returns false and Blazor forces a sign out. Protected override timespan revalidation interval equals and GT timespan. From minutes, 30. Protected override async task envelopable and GT validate authentication state async. Authentication state, cancellation token CT. Await using var scope equals scope factory. Create async scope. var user manager equals scope. Service provider. Get required service and LT user manager and LT application user and GT. var user equals await user manager. Get user async. Authentication state. User. If user is null, user. Is deleted, user. Is active, return false. / check security stamp matches current stamp, */. Return principal stamp equals user stamp. 8 The Razor UI. Every page is an interactive server Blazor component. I kept things server rendered because Sprint 1 is administrative and small. An interactive server avoids the low WASM runtime latency. The web.client project is present and wired so future features can opt into auto interactivity per page. 8.1 App and Roots. App.Razor is the HTML shell. It preloads Radzen's material-based style sheet, myapp.css, and the Blazor framework script. Envelop rel equals style sheet href equals _content /radzen.blazor /css material base.css /ngt. Envelop rel equals style sheet href equals @assets app css /ngt. Envelop rel equals style sheet href equals @assets Naija Prime School.web.styles.css /ngt. and lt root / and gt. Handle script src equals _ content / radzen.blazor / radzen.blazor.js and gt and lt / script and gt. Handle script src equals at assets _ framework / blazor.web.js and gt and lt / script and gt. Roots.razor uses authorize root view so an unauthenticated user hitting a protected page gets sent to the login flow, via redirect to login a tiny client component that calls navigation manager.navigate to with force load, true. 8.2 _ imports.razor. Every page shares one set of usings, so most components do not need any using directives of their own. Using Microsoft.aspnetcore.authorization. Using Microsoft.aspnetcore.components.authorization. Using Microsoft.aspnetcore.components.forms. Using Radzen. Using Radzen.blazor. Using Naija Prime School.domain.identity. Using Naija Prime School.application.common. Using Naija Prime School.application.users. Using Naija Prime School.application.users.tos. Using Naija Prime School.web.components.account. Using Naija Prime School.web.components.layout. 8.3 Main layout and NAV menu. Main layout wraps authenticated pages with a Radzen layout, header on top, brand, sign out form, sidebar on the left, NAV menu, and a Radzen body for page content. The whole tree is inside and LT authorize view and GT so the sidebar is hidden on login / access denied screens. NAV menu renders different items depending on which roles the signed in user has. Only super admins see the user management group, other role groups are stubbed as disabled equals true items, reserving the space in the sidebar for future sprints. 8.4 Sign-in page login.razor. The login page is a classic server-rendered edit form with form name equals login so Blazor binds the post back to the same component. It accepts either a username or an email address, checks that the user is not soft deleted or deactivated, and calls sign-in manager.password sign-in async with lockout on failure, true so the identity lockout policy applies. var user equals await user manager.find by name async, input.email. Await user manager.find by email async, input.email. If user is null user.is deleted, error message equals invalid sign-in attempt, return. If user.is active, error message equals your account has been deactivated, return. var result equals await sign-in manager.password sign-in async. User.username, input.password, input.remember me, lockout on failure, true. On success the page redirects to the return URL query string parameter or to the dashboard. Lockout surface a friendly message. 8.5 The users list x users.razor. The list is a Radzen data grid with server-side paging. Above the grid I placed a filter bar x a text box bound to search term, a role dropdown, and an active/inactive dropdown. Every change calls load async, which rebuilds a user list filter and hands it to iUserService.listAsync. Rows show full name with the email underneath it, via the template slot, followed by username, a horizontal stack of role badges, and a green/gray status badge. Row actions live in the rightmost column, edit, assign roles, and either deactivate or activate depending on current status. Deactivate asks for confirmation via dialog service.confirm before calling iUserService.setActiveAsync x no accidental clicks. After every action I reload the page via load async and push a Radzen notification so the admin gets feedback. 8.6 Add user x create user.razor. The add user form is a Radzen template form bound to a create user request. It uses and LT data annotations validator /and GT so all the required, email address, string length and compare attributes I put on the DTO are enforced with no extra ceremony. The role selector is a Radzen checkbox list bound directly to model.roles, via value/value changed/value expression, X binding to model.roles, not a separate field, is important so that data annotations validator sees the selection and the min length. 1. Validation on roles actually prevents submit. On submit the page calls iUserService.createAsync, shows a Radzen notification on success or spreads the operation result.errors into a red notification on failure, then navigates back to /users. 8.7 Edit user x edit user.razor. The edit page routes on /users/id GUID, loads the user via iUserService.getById and presents the same profile fields as the add form, minus username, password, and roles, which are handled elsewhere. The header carries activate/deactivate buttons and a shortcut to the role assignment page. 8.8 Assign roles x user roles.razor. This page is intentionally small, a Radzen checkbox list of every role bound to the user's current role set, plus save/cancel. On save it calls iUserService.assign roles async, which diffs and applies only the change set so audit history stays clean. 8.9 Roles catalog x roles page.razor. A read-only grid at /roles lists every role with its description and a system/custom badge x useful for admins who want to see the full taxonomy at a glance. All rows are system because Sprint 1 seeds them from code. 8.10 Reset password x reset password dialog.razor. Admin initiated password reset is a Radzen dialog hosted inside edit user, not a separate root. It asks for a new password, twice, validates the confirmation, and calls iUserService.setPasswordAsync, which internally generates an identity reset token and applies it x far safer than touching the password hash directly. 8.11 Home dashboard. The home page shows the signed-in user's name and 4 stat tiles, total users, roles configured, active users, deactivated users. It also renders superadmin-only quick action buttons for manage users and add user. All stats are computed once on uninitialized async with the existing services x. No new endpoint was needed. 9 Theming x the Nigerian green plus gold skin. Radzen ships with neutral base style sheets. I layered a thin custom skin on top, word/app CSS, using CSS custom properties so every page can reference NPS green/NPS gold/NPS ink 500 and stay consistent. Only 3 concerns matter. H color tokens x deep Nigerian green for primary, gold for accents, a muted ink palette for text and borders. H layout primitives x.nps page container, .nps page header, .nps card, .nps form grid, 2-column responsive grid, .nps form actions. Used on every page for a consistent rhythm. H the auth page x.nps auth page and .nps auth card give the login screen a centered, shadowed card with a brand mark. I deliberately avoided Tailwind/Sass for Sprint 1 because the Radzen plus CSS variables approach is enough for a small admin area, and it means there is no additional build step for the front end. 10 Running the application locally. 10.1 App settings.json. Connection strings. Default connection, server equals dot, database equals Naija Prime School, trusted _ connection equals true, multiple active result sets equals true, trust server certificate equals true. Logging. Log level, default, information, Microsoft.aspnetcore, warning. Allowed hosts, asterisk. For SQL Server local DB change server equals. To server equals localb, /MSSQL local DB. The connection string never contains real credentials in the committed file x. Production secrets live in user secrets or environment variables. 10.2 Restore, build, run. .NET Restore. .NET Build. .NET Run Project src/Naija Prime School.web. On first run the database initializer creates the schema, seeds the lookups, roles, and the default superadmin. The console prints the URL to open, typically https://localhost 7xxx. I signed in with email, superadmin at naijaprime.school.ng. Password, admin at 12345. Copyright change immediately in users edit reset password. 10.3 A suggested VS Code launch configuration. C# dev kit auto generates.vscode/launch.json. The first time I press F5, but I keep a handwritten version so everyone on the team gets the same experience. Version 0.2.0. Configurations. Name, .NET Core Launch, Web. Type, curricular. Request, Launch. Pre-launch task, Build. Program, $workspace folder /src/naija_prime_school.web/bin/debug/net10.0/naija_prime_school.web.dll. CWD, $workspace folder /src/naija_prime_school.web. Stop at entry, false. Server ready action, open externally, pattern, // now listening on // s plus, https, :// s plus. env, aspnetcore _environment, development. 11 Source control and pushing to GitHub. The final step is putting the sprint under version control. I did everything from the VS Code terminal. 11.1 Writing a sensible .gitinery. I hand-rolled a .gitinery covering the usual .NET build outputs, bin/, obj/, Visual Studio and Writer user state, .vs/, .vscode/, .idea/, star.suo, .user, new get caches, publish profiles, app settings.local.json and app settings.production.json, plus secrets like .env, star.pfx, and secrets.json. Nothing sensitive leaves the repo. 11.2 First commit on the sprint branch. Git init b main. Git remote add origin https://github.com/benjaminsqlserver/naijaprime_school.git. Git checkout b sprint/1 identity and user management. Git add.gitinery readme.md naijaprime_school.slnx src. Git status short hashtag sanity check no bin / obj/ or .vs/. Git commit m sprint 1, identity and user management foundation. I avoided git add so nothing unexpected would slip in. The status output confirmed only source, the solution file, the readme, and the .gitinery were staged. 11.3 Pushing to the empty GitHub repo. I had already created an empty public repository at github.com/benjaminsqlserver/naijaprime_school in the GitHub UI, without a readme or .gitinery. The local commit is the initial state. Then, git push u origin sprint/1 identity and user management. Hashtag populate main with the same commit so GitHub's default branch is not empty. Git branch main sprint/1 identity and user management. Git push u origin main. Git credential manager prompted me once for GitHub credentials via a browser pop-up. Subsequent pushes reuse the stored token. Sprint 1 is now live on both main and sprint/1 identity and user management. 12 Appendix project map. For reference, the key files produced during sprint 1 and what each is for. Path. Purpose. src/naijaprimeschool.domain/common/base entity.cs. Base ID plus audit plus soft delete fields. src/naijaprimeschool.domain/identity/application-user.cs. Identity user and LTGUID and GT with profile, audit, and soft delete. src/naijaprimeschool.domain/identity/roles.cs. String constants for role names not an enum. src/naijaprimeschool.application/common/icurrent-user.cs. Abstraction over the signed-in user, implemented in web. src/naijaprimeschool.application/common/operation-result.cs. Success/failure shape returned by services. src/Naija Prime School.application/users/iuserservice.cs. User management contract, CRUD plus roles plus password. src/Naija Prime School.infrastructure/persistence/application DB context.cs. Identity DB context plus query filters plus save changes auditing. src/Naija Prime School.infrastructure/persistence/database initializer.cs. Migrate plus seed lookups, roles, superadmin. src/Naija Prime School.infrastructure/services/userservice.cs. Implementation using user manager/role manager/db context. src/Naija Prime School.infrastructure/ add infrastructure decomposition for the app. Dependency injection.cs. src/Naija Prime School.web/program.cs. Host wiring, identity, cookies, Radzen, policies, endpoints, DB init. src/Naija Prime School.web/services/current user accessor.cs. Hub context-backed iCurrent user implementation. src/Naija Prime School.web/components/account/pages/login.razor. Sign-in page, edit form plus sign-in manager. src/Naija Prime School.web/components/pages/users/ list/create/edit/role/reset password. src/Naija Prime School.web/components/layout/main layout.razor. Radzen shell with sidebar plus header. src/Naija Prime School.web/root/app/css. Green plus gold school skin. End of Sprint 1 implementation guide. Sprint 2 picks up the academic domain, sessions, terms, classes, subjects.